I never imagined you would grow up to be so splendid. You truly are my child. I am proud of you." When I was 12, my mother, along with my 6th sister, suddenly disappeared. For a long time there was no contact, and I didn't know where they were, but one day, when I had grown up, my mother suddenly appeared at my workplace. It seems that she had accidentally heard somewhere that I graduated top of my class from a medical school. She showed up in front of me again, trying to conveniently use me for her own purposes. What did she want after all this time? It was far too selfish. After she left me alone when I was still only 12, I only felt disgust towards her when she approached me as soon as I was successful, and it even felt creepy. The reason I wanted to become a doctor was to help my suffering sister and others like her. It was not for my mother. "What do you want now? I am no longer your daughter. Please go home." When I calmly rejected her, my mother showed a momentary look of confusion. Despite my strong desire to cut ties with my mother, I couldn't help but worry about my sister, and I started to think if I could at least give her a medical examination. When I looked at my sister, she didn't say anything, but I could clearly see that she was asking for help with her eyes. In that moment, I impulsively pushed my sister's wheelchair and rushed into the examination room nearby. "Wah, Rebecca. I missed you." As soon as we entered the room, my sister suddenly started crying. With those tears, she recounted the events of the past 14 years, and I was lost for words. I have resolved never to let my mother have her way again. I am Rebecca, a 26-year-old working adult. Although my days are busy, I am now living my life feeling happy. However, my current peaceful life feels like a miracle, and my childhood was far from happy, filled with ongoing difficulties. My life changed drastically when I was 10. Our family's pillar, my father, suddenly passed away due to an illness. When my father was alive, we were a close-knit and ordinary family. My parents were very kind, and my sister was adorable, so I lived a happy life. However, such peaceful days crumbled in an instant when my father died. The first to change was my mother. Originally mentally fragile and prone to emotional swings, she became even more unstable after losing my father, and she started to grow increasingly irritable in everyday life. She began to yell more at my sister and me. We were still young and were simply shocked and confused by our mother's transformation. We couldn't understand why she had changed so much and could only surrender to the situation. When my father was alive, he would notice any changes in my mother right away and would calm her down, so we didn't take it too seriously. My mother had always been dependent on my father, so when he reprimanded her, she quickly calmed down and clung to him almost affectionately. However, with my father's death, she sank into deep sorrow and became so unstable that she would stay locked in her room all day, unable to do anything for a while. As a result, she became unable to go to work and quit her part-time job, spending all day at home. Thankfully, there was enough from my father's estate and life insurance, and moreover, my mother's parents had been wealthy, so she inherited a substantial fortune. Thus, even though my mother didn't work, we did not struggle financially. Nevertheless, my mother's mental state continued to deteriorate. She became overly dependent on and favored my physically weak and frequently ill sister, Kelly, while becoming cold towards me. "I'm hungry, Mom." "Kelly is keeping me busy. What now?" "I'll give you money. Go buy whatever you want." Saying this, my mother handed me some money. However, the amount was only $2, which was enough for just one croissant. Thus, my mother stopped preparing meals for me, and I was unable to have a proper meal at home. Not only that, but using my sister's care as an excuse, she stopped showing up at my school events altogether. For me, my mother's indifference increasingly isolated my heart and made me bear more and more painful feelings. I need to be by Kelly's side, or terrible things will happen. I don't have time to attend your events. My mother refused not only to attend events like sports days and cultural festivals, but also personal interviews with homeroom teachers. Although the school requested interviews several times, my mother convincingly told the teachers that she had to take care of a sick family member. Looking back now, I think there were many problems with my mother's actions. However, even then, to a primary school student like me, my mother was my only parent and someone I could rely on. Because of this, I couldn't rebel against her words and actions and just had to obey. I also loved my sister dearly and was very worried about her poor health. From these feelings, I decided to turn a blind eye to the reality that I was sacrificing myself for my sister. No matter how harsh the words I received from my mother were, I forced myself to listen and tried to alleviate the pain in my heart. As a child, I might have believed that it was important to endure for the sake of my family. Perhaps it would have been better if I had relied more on someone else, but my maternal grandparents had already passed away, and my paternal grandmother was elderly and in a care facility, so I had no close relatives to turn to. That was the situation, so the idea of consulting someone never occurred to me. While my mother treated me coldly, my sister often asked me to play with her. I cherished my sister, and we were truly close. As she did my hair, my sister said, "I want to be a hairdresser once I'm cured." "Kelly, you're so skilled. I can't even braid my own hair." "Really? Then I'll do your hair every day." My sister usually looked pale, but when she played with my hair, her complexion improved, her eyes sparkled, and she looked like a healthy, normal girl to me. However, my mother's attitude towards me worsened even further. What used to be mere coldness had, at some point, turned into my mother verbally abusing me harshly. "Are you really my daughter? Why can't you be like Kelly? I don't need a child like you. It's enough if just Kelly is here." These words, implying that I had no value at all, were all that came from my mother's mouth. At first, I was deeply hurt by her words, but eventually I got used to the situation and started to feel worthless. Furthermore, the time I spent with my sister, whom I loved dearly, was increasingly restricted by my mother. "Don't push Kelly too hard. Can you take responsibility if her condition worsens?" Whenever I was in my sister's room, my mother would always scold me and pull me away from her. We could no longer play together, but instead we started communicating through eye signals, and eventually we could somewhat understand each other's feelings just by looking. On days when my sister seemed well, I felt reassured just by looking into her eyes, relieved by her expression as if to say thank you for taking care of me. Conversely, when she silently pleaded with her eyes that she wanted something to eat, I would secretly pass her a cookie, and she would return a smile as if she had received a treasure. This secret exchange between us sisters deepened our bond even further. However, it seemed that my mother was not pleased with this bond, and perhaps our continued closeness, even when separated, angered her, causing her to yell at me even more. I think my mother couldn't accept that I was independent and capable of handling things on my own. She was a person with a strong desire to be needed by someone. When my father was alive, she satisfied this need by depending on him, but after his death, she lost her object of dependency. As a result, I think she positioned my physically weak sister as a substitute for my father. My mother poured her affection onto my sister and relied on her to fulfill her own needs. On the other hand, having never been able to rely on my mother from a young age and forced to handle everything myself, I think my mother did not see me as a target for her affection. Perhaps my independence was something my mother actually resented. This situation further deepened the rift in our relationship. I can think calmly about things now, but back then, I had no such luxury and had to live a lonely life, receiving cold treatment from my mother after losing my father. I believed that my mother was just irritated because of taking care of my sister, and once Kelly got better, she would show me affection too. Convinced of this, I desperately comforted myself while living. Then, 2 years after my father's death, it was my 12th birthday. An unexpected event occurred. When I returned from school, an unusual silence filled the house. I thought perhaps my mother and Kelly were planning to surprise me for my birthday. As I entered the house, that's what I thought. So, I decided to surprise them instead by finding where they were hiding. I quietly started searching for them. However, I could not find my mother or Kelly anywhere. Moreover, upon closer inspection, I noticed that clothes and personal items were missing from my mother's and Kelly's rooms. What was happening? My feelings of anticipation turned to anxiety, and I began to panic. I searched the house thoroughly again, but still, there was no sign of the two of them, and it wasn't a hospital day for Kelly either, according to the calendar. I was panicked, but I decided to go back to school and honestly tell my teacher what was happening. As I told my story, the teacher initially looked incredulous, but gradually her expression became more serious. After I finished telling everything, the teacher fell silent as if deep in thought, then decided to contact Child Protective Services immediately. After the teacher explained the situation and consulted with them, I was taken into temporary custody by Child Protective Services. I couldn't accept the fact that my mother and sister had suddenly disappeared, and I was bewildered. The only thing I knew was that it seemed my mother had abandoned me. Faced with this reality, a gaping hole opened in my heart. I wondered how my weak sister was doing. What was my mother thinking? Many thoughts welled up, and I cried alone in my blanket. A few days later, I was called by the director of the child welfare facility. I was dizzy from lack of proper sleep, but he told me something. "From today on, this is your home, Rebecca." Those words clearly indicated that I had been abandoned by my mother. Although I had somewhat prepared myself for the fact that my mother might not return, the sadness was overwhelming, and I couldn't stop the tears. Why? Why didn't you take me with you, Mom? Unable to bear it, I cried out loud. The director held me in his arms for a long time. Life at the facility was not particularly inconvenient, and it was a relief not to worry about meals. However, even as I gradually got used to life at the facility, the feelings of loneliness and anxiety never disappeared, and I became mentally exhausted. Various interests I had before entering the facility faded, and I often couldn't sleep at night due to fear in the dark and quiet. The director was very worried as he saw me losing weight day by day. He would talk to me and give me quizzes to distract me. While talking to him, I could enjoy myself, but when alone, I would fall into deep thought and often had sleepless nights. Then, one day, a turning point came. The director approached with a smile and handed me a piece of paper. "You have wonderful abilities. You can become anything. It would be good to take more interest in the things around you." He had given me the results of an IQ test, which I had thought was just a quiz. My IQ was higher than most people's, placing me in the upper tier. Seeing the director more surprised and happy than I was brightened my mood. The cold treatment I received from my mother had made me feel worthless, but the director of the facility couldn't stop praising me. For the first time, this made my heart warm. A little while later, a couple who wanted to be my foster parents appeared. I was suspicious at first, wondering if there was some ulterior motive in their willingness to take in someone else's child. Initially, I didn't trust them. However, as we met several times, those feelings began to fade. They were truly kind people and treated me as if I were their own child. Thanks to them, I gradually began to feel grateful, and before I knew it, I was calling them Mom and Dad. Years passed, and when I became a sophomore in high school, they told me they wanted me to become their child, and I hugged them in happiness. We went through with the adoption, and we officially became a family. Life with my adoptive parents was very fulfilling. However, a few months after we became a family, my adoptive father fell ill. Fortunately, he was quickly taken to the hospital, and the surgery went well. However, he had to stay in the hospital for a while after that, and my adoptive mother became less energetic, possibly due to the exhaustion from caregiving. Seeing my adoptive parents like this, I was reminded of the scene when my biological father passed away. The image of my real father gradually losing his vitality came to mind. My real mother was grieving, and my weak sister, by her side, was smiling with a face that seemed about to fade away. The desire to save even one person suffering from illness grew stronger, and I decided to become a doctor. Afterward, I studied hard and managed to pass the entrance exam for medical school. Having always been good at studying, I was able to enter as a scholarship student. I was really glad that I could enter as a scholarship student because I did not want to burden my adoptive parents with tuition. After entering, I continued to study seriously and, surprisingly, graduated at the top of my medical school class. Afterwards, I passed the national exam on my first attempt and started working as a resident at a university hospital. It was a time filled with learning, and every day was enveloped in tension as mistakes were not allowed when dealing with patients. Though the days were busy and harsh, I felt fulfilled. However, one day something unexpected happened. While I was in the back office, a reception nurse approached me. I thought she was going to ask me something, but instead, she brought surprising news. "Someone is here to see you." I had no idea who could possibly be visiting me. Thinking it might be a patient I had previously treated, I headed to the reception, and there I found. "It's been a while. Do you recognize me?" "Eh?" "Mom, Kelly." Standing before me were my biological mother and sister. Despite it being 14 years since we last met, my mother was smiling and waving at me by name. My sister was sitting in a wheelchair, looking exhausted. I was shocked and confused by this sudden reunion. What could they possibly want after all this time? I had a bad feeling about this, and it didn't seem like it would be a simple matter. Intuitively feeling this, I kept my composure while softening my expression and said to them, "I'm sorry, but can you wait in the lobby for about 30 minutes? I should be able to make some time then." When I said this, my mother brightly responded, "Okay, we'll wait until then," and went to the lobby with my sister. As I watched their backs, anger welled up in me. After leaving me behind, she now appears as if nothing happened and behaves as if we're just a normal family. I couldn't understand why my mother had appeared before me now, but I had a bad feeling about it. Carrying that unease, I finished up my work and hurried to the lobby where they were waiting. As I approached, my mother noticed me and smiled brightly, clearly delighted. Unable to contain my emotions, I confronted her with anger. "Why are you here? What do you want after all this time?" Unperturbed by my icy reception, my mother laughed and replied, "I saw you on TV. I had no idea you had become a doctor, and I was so surprised that I just had to come see you. Indeed, about a year ago, I had discovered a rare disease case and presented it at a major conference with a renowned doctor in that field. Since then, my research had progressed, and recently news had reported that my findings might lead to the development of a new treatment drug, which had gotten some attention. It appears that my mother saw a clip of me giving a speech at the conference on TV and decided to visit me because of it. I can't believe how well you've grown. You truly are my child. I am so proud of you." While my mother showed a smile, my heart grew colder. I felt disgusted by her approaching me now that I had gained a little fame, after she had abandoned me. "Where have you been all this time since you left me?" Struggling to suppress my urge to shout, I asked her calmly. However, my mother didn't answer my question and started talking about something else. "I have a favor to ask of you." Despite my irritation with her attitude, I was curious about why she had come all this way. What kind of favor was she going to ask for? I braced myself, suspecting it might be a request for financial help. But the words that came from my mother's mouth were far beyond my expectations. "It's just a small thing. If you appear on TV or at conferences in the future, I just want you to introduce me as your mother." "What? Why?" Her request was so unexpected that I involuntarily distorted my face. According to her, she had seen me on TV and then searched for me on the internet to find out more about me. She also learned that I had graduated at the top of my class from university. She thought that if I was smart enough to graduate top of medical school, I would become famous eventually. If that happened, she expected to be recognized as the mother of a famous doctor, and that's why she came to see me, my mother said. I struggled to understand how she could think that way. But what really bothered me was the word mother. Was this person who had abandoned me now pretending to be a mother? She hadn't even made meals properly and had treated me coldly and harshly. Anger was bubbling up inside me, but I managed to suppress it and spoke to her in a calm tone. After you abandoned me, I was adopted by a wonderful couple. They were very kind and loved me as their own child. So my mother is now the woman who raised me, not you. Therefore, I won't introduce you as my mother. When I said this firmly, my mother's face instantly turned stern. How dare you? I am the one who gave birth to you. As long as you are my child, you should listen to me without question. My mother shouted, her expression changing from kind to filled with anger. Once I would have cowered at her yelling and complied with her demands, however unpleasant. But now, things were different. I was an adult and was raised with plenty of love from my adoptive parents. I no longer had any reason to fear my mother's intimidation. I had no intention of interacting with her ever again. With that strong resolve, I firmly told her, I am no longer your daughter. Please go home. When I calmly rejected her, my mother showed a moment of confusion. I hoped she would give up and leave, but what worried me inside was my sister. I wondered if she was all right. Then suddenly, my mother changed her tone and asked, Your sister is ill. We're running out of money, and I have debts, so we're in trouble. Could you help us a little? Mentioning my sister made it hard for me to respond firmly. It seemed like her eyes were pleading for something. After some thought and advice from a colleague, I decided to provide conditional support. The term would be 1 year, with $1,000 each month, on the condition that she seriously repays her debts during this time. I always tended to be soft on my sister. My desire to help her was strong. So I offered my support. For a while it seemed my mother was keeping her promise and repaying the debts. However, one day by chance, I saw my mother shopping at a high-end brand store. Feeling suspicious, I hired a detective agency to investigate her. The results were shockingly worse than I imagined. Far from repaying her debts, my mother was wasting the money I sent on luxury goods and gambling. I immediately stopped the transfers. Furthermore, I decided to take legal action. Even though she was my mother, this could not be condoned. I felt it was outright criminal. As expected, when I stopped the transfers, my mother brought my sister to the hospital again, shouting and making a scene. I had no energy left to talk, and I forgot what was said, but I made it clear that I was ending the assistance. I thought I was helping because you said it was for my sister. If the money is being used for you, then I no longer have any intention of providing financial assistance. I can no longer trust anything you say. We are no longer family, so please do as you wish, that's all. Just like last time, I was terribly worried about my sister's condition. Before she went back with my mother, I wondered if I could at least provide a medical examination for her. Looking at my sister, she didn't say anything, but I could definitely see in her eyes that she was asking for help. When I saw my sister Kelly's eyes after such a long time, they seemed to be pleading for help, and I couldn't help but be concerned about her condition. Instinctively, I grabbed Kelly's wrist to check her pulse. Despite my mother screaming, "Stop it," I ignored her. I was shocked by the thinness of Kelly's wrist. As I was surprised by her frailty, Kelly managed to squeeze out a weak voice. "Rebecca, there's something I need to tell you." Realizing something was wrong with Kelly, I quickly wheeled her into an unused examination room. As I locked the door hastily, my mother was outside banging on it and shouting, "What are you doing? Open the door." My mother was hitting the door as if she would break it, but soon a security guard came and took her away somewhere. "Wah, Rebecca, I've missed you." As soon as we entered the room, Kelly suddenly started crying. Immediately, I hugged her, and tears overflowed from both of us. After crying for a while, Kelly regained her composure and began to tell me what had happened. On the day the two disappeared, My mother suddenly said they were going out. Kelly realized I wasn't there, but my mother said, "Don't worry, we'll meet up with your sister at the place we're going." Having no choice but to believe her, Kelly went with our mother. However, the place they were taken to was far from home, and there was no sign of me, who was supposed to meet up with them. Kelly felt deceived by our mother and said she often cried out of loneliness at first. But each time, she was scolded by our mother, and gradually, she learned to hold back her tears due to fear. While trying not to anger our mother, years passed. Kelly had been frail in her childhood, but gradually her health improved, and she no longer fell ill as often. However, our mother was not pleased by this improvement. My mother enjoyed being seen as the devoted mother supporting her frail daughter and received praise from others for it. To maintain this image, she mentally cornered Kelly and made sure she obeyed. "If you don't listen to me, I'll leave you alone. Then you won't be able to survive," she was told every day. Sometimes she was yelled at loudly. Gradually, Kelly began to feel that she couldn't survive unless she did exactly as our mother said, and it drove her to become mentally ill. Kelly described that time with a very bitter expression. Kelly was brainwashed by our mother, kept isolated in the house, unable to meet anyone, and her meals were restricted to maintain her emaciated state. Our mother falsely claimed that Kelly was sick, and moreover, she forced her to take an unnecessary amount of medication to deliberately worsen her condition, calling the ambulance multiple times. At the hospital she was transported to, she explained that my daughter is mentally ill and took too many pills, and to neighbors, she lied that it was an attack of a chronic condition. As this continued, people around them and the hospital began to grow suspicious. But before the lies were uncovered, our mother took Kelly and moved to another town as if they were fleeing in the night. After repeating this multiple times, Kelly told me she had lived these past years, caught in the scenarios our mother had created. However, it seems our mother grew unsatisfied with just being seen as the devoted mother of a sick daughter. At that time, she happened to see me on TV. Believing that my becoming famous could make her famous too, our mother planned to rebuild a relationship with me, talk about Kelly in front of many people, and gain their sympathy. Kelly had suppressed her feelings due to our mother's pressure, but meeting me after several years made her fear that if she didn't speak up now, this situation would continue. With that, she found the courage to speak. As she talked, perhaps remembering that time, Kelly occasionally shivered. I hugged her tightly. "Thank you for telling me all this. I'll take care of it from now on, so don't worry anymore." Kelly seemed reassured and started crying again. After gently stroking her head, I called the police. Leaving Kelly there, I went to find my mother, who had been taken away by the security guards. I found her, and the guards in a nearby lounge explained the situation to them, and asked, "Could you detain my mother until the police arrive?" Then, I turned to face my mother directly. Hearing everything from Kelly had intensified my anger towards her, and with eyes full of contempt, I said, "I've heard everything from Kelly. No one needs you as a mother. I've called the police." My mother, restrained by the security guards, did not resist and looked resigned. Surprised by my words, she was at a loss for words. Seeing her reaction, I returned to Kelly. After the police arrived, we were interviewed and explained everything that had happened. The police listened to our story and told us they would conduct a thorough investigation before departing. After the interview, Kelly received a medical examination in internal medicine. The results showed that although her leg muscles were weak, she was not so ill as to need a wheelchair permanently, and with rehabilitation, she would be able to walk without problems. It also became clear that she was in a state of severe malnutrition. Apparently, the wheelchair was part of my mother's theatrics, used to garner more sympathy by forcibly placing her in it. What a hopeless thing for a mother to do. Kelly was admitted to the hospital to be on the safe side, and afterward, I took over caring for her. She was discharged but remained overall weakened. It took time, but we focused on her recuperation. When Kelly finally regained her health to a normal level, the court concluded that my mother, who had been detained by the police, was guilty. I had to go to court several times to testify, but my mother continued to make self-centered statements throughout the trial. As I sat at the witness stand, my mother's joyful exclamation, "She's a fine doctor," my child filled me with unease. We knew we would no longer have to see her face. We sighed in relief and exchanged glances of reassurance. As Kelly gradually recovered her health, she began to speak of her dream of becoming a hairstylist, just like she used to. Hearing her say this warmed my heart and made me feel as if I could see a hopeful future ahead. A bright expression appeared on Kelly's face, and she showed a genuine smile. Seeing her smile was the most important thing to me, and I was truly happy that her cheerfulness had returned. I felt that she was going to be all right. With that thought, I decided to introduce her to our adoptive parents so she could make a fresh start. I was excited about the prospect of sharing this new beginning with her. Although the meeting was still some time away, seeing Kelly already nervous and excited made me feel warm inside. I couldn't help but smile. Despite the hustle and bustle at home, I had completed my residency, gained various experiences, and was now beginning my path as an attending physician. I vowed to become a distinguished doctor for my sister, my adoptive parents, and in honor of my Father in heaven. I was determined to meet their expectations and to continue striving every day to be a doctor they could truly trust.